I have here with me the former Prime Minister of Barbados, the Honorable Owen Arthur. Mr. Arthur, welcome again to St. Kitts and Nevis.
I said, thank you very kindly.
What brings you to the Federation at this time?
I'm doing a project for the United Nations, a consulting project. As you are aware, the United Nations at the turn of the century set a number of goals for the world, the Millennium Development Goals, to cut poverty in half and a number of goals. And those goals are to be achieved by 2015. It is in the process of doing a review to determine what progress countries have made in attaining the objectives sought by the goals. And at this year's General Assembly of the United Nations, there's intended to be a high-level plenary to look at where the world is in respect to the Millennium Development Goals. The UN, to its credit, is paying particular attention to the circumstances of small island developing states. These states have, between the start of the century and now, have been impacted by a number of factors and forces which bear upon their capacity to achieve the goals set by the global community. In your case and in the case of most developing small states, you've been impacted by environmental and natural disasters. You've had to face the problems of trade liberalization, the loss of sugar industry. You've had also to deal recently with the global crisis. But it's a characteristic now of most small developing island states that they have debt problems and have had to put in place programs to bring about fiscal consolidation and debt sustainability that leave them with little fiscal space to be able to do what they promise in respect of the Millennium Development Goals. So at this year's UN General Assembly, there will be a presentation done on the progress made by small island developing states to achieve the Millennium Development Goals and to look at the way in which those forces are affecting their ability to do so. 4 small island developing states will be the subject of case studies for this presentation: Grenada and St. Kitts and Nevis. And I have been commissioned by the United Nations Development Office in the Caribbean to do the case studies to present to the global community on how these countries are dealing with the accomplishment of their goals, taking into account especially those factors that have affected them so significantly, not the least being your debt, sustainability, and fiscal consolidation. So I spent a day here meeting with your finance officials and the Eastern Caribbean Central. I have spent some time in Grenada to put together the information to have the report, a draft report ready to discuss with officials on its way to the nation. So I'm here on that kind of mission.
Prime Minister, you are visiting St. Kitts and Nevis at a time when the value-added tax is being debated in the National Assembly of this Twin Island Federation. I recall you were Prime Minister when the VAT was introduced in Barbados. Why was it necessary to introduce it, and what year did the introduction take place?
The value-added tax was introduced by the administration that I led in 1997. And the fact, let me just say, without trying to get involved in your domestic politics, that I am surprised that it has taken you so long, because you are subject to the same forces in St. Kitts and Nevis as we are in Barbados that warranted the introduction of value-added tax. And may I also make the point that I supported the introduction of a value-added tax in Barbados before I became Prime Minister, when I was opposition spokesman on finance, and therefore understood the need to implement it as Prime Minister. But a number of factors explain it. First of all, we are living in an age of trade liberalization. What it means specifically, if you take that concept and break it down, is that to be part of a Caribbean single market and single economy, we have had to remove taxes, import duties on goods coming from the rest of the Caribbean. And that's what it means. And also, all Caribbean countries that are part of the CSME have had also to reduce their top rate of import duties from 45% to 20% to implement what is called a common external tariff. We had to do that in 1998. That's why, in order to compensate for the loss of that revenue, we introduced that in 1997. But subsequent to that, the region has become more and more deeply involved in relationships that require the removal of import duties. Recently, we entered an economic partnership agreement with Europe, which is about now to take full effect because they had a 3-year grace period. What that EPA involves is removal by the region and economies like St. Kitts and Nevis of import duties of goods coming from Europe that have historically have carried an import duty. The region is also negotiating a similar arrangement with Canada. I would imagine that other countries will sooner or later ask the region to put in place new trade arrangements with them. So in the age of trade liberalization, countries that have historically depended on import duties for a large part of their revenues now have to remove those import duties, and you have to replace them with something. Now, a value-added tax is one of the options and the best option because you can target the implementation of a value-added tax to free exports, to make your economy more competitive. You can also target it to allow the sectors that you feel are areas of activity that are worthy of exemption from taxes to be exempted from taxes. But more to the point, it brings an assuredness to the collection of government revenues to enable you to have a sound fiscal position. The value-added tax allows you to broaden the base of taxes to include things that historically have not been subject to tax. And therefore, with a broader base of tax, you can lower the rate. In Barbados' case, our value-added tax at 15% replaced 11 little bits and pieces of taxes. We were collecting tax by way of a consumption tax, small base, but high rate, so the prices of those things were very high, over 20%. We had a separate hotel and restaurant sales tax. You have one way, therefore, of collecting the tax, and it brought greater assuredness to government financial circumstance. It allows you, therefore, to do a number of strategic things. Having said that, of course, you have to manage the implementation of the tax, because while it has its benefits, it can have its very, very serious defects in implementation if you don't manage those correctly. And I suppose you may want me to talk about that as well.